I found a locked vault in a forgotten motel, and inside was the secret that would either make me rich or destroy my life. My name is Samantha Carter, though most people just call me Sam. I'm 29 years old, and if you'd asked me 6 months ago where I'd be right now, I would have said stuck in some New York office cubicle, half dead under fluorescent lights, pushing products I didn't even believe in, and hating every second of it. But that was before I drove past the crumbling sign for the Desert Rose Motel. I grew up in Silver Creek, Arizona, the kind of small desert town where dust drifts like snow across the roads, and the neon lights from old roadside diners still flicker against the pitch-black night. My parents, Bill and Denise Carter, ran a hardware store there for years until the economy tanked and tourists stopped coming. Now, our once busy town feels like a ghost clinging to memories of better days. My brother, Lucas, took off the second he could. He's 32, living in Austin, Texas, working as a software engineer, driving a shiny Tesla, wearing suits tailored to perfection, and, as he loves to remind me, making responsible choices. Me, I've always been the one who didn't quite fit the mold. I tried to follow the rules, got my degree in marketing, landed a job at a big firm in Manhattan, but every day felt like another piece of me was dying. I'd sit there at my desk, staring out at the city skyline, feeling like I was suffocating in a life that wasn't mine. I wanted more than just a paycheck and polite conversations about quarterly reports. I craved something real, something that made my heart race. So 6 months ago, after the worst screaming match of my career with my boss, I walked out of that glass tower for good. No backup plan, no job waiting, just the terrifying freedom of not knowing what the hell would come next. I packed up my tiny apartment, loaded my old Subaru with every box I owned, and drove west. I thought I was going home to lick my wounds, to figure things out, maybe to prove to my family that I wasn't a total screw-up. Instead, I found the Desert Rose Motel, and from the moment I saw its peeling paint and neon roses hanging crooked over Route 89, I felt this pull deep in my chest, like the building itself was calling out to me, whispering secrets only I was meant to find. Little did I know, that voice would lead me to a locked vault hidden behind a false wall. And the moment I cracked it open, my life changed forever. My family has always measured success in neat, predictable ways: a steady job, a mortgage, a 401k, a partner who looks good in holiday photos. Growing up in Silver Creek, I felt like my life was being drawn inside the tight lines of a coloring book, and any time I colored outside them, someone was there to scold me back into place. My parents, Bill and Denise, are good people, salt-of-the-earth types. Dad ran Carter's Hardware for 3 decades. Mom taught 2nd grade at the local elementary school, greeting each kid like they were her own. But they believe in stability like it's a religion. They still tell the story of how they met at a high school dance in the Silver Creek gym, how they saved every penny for a down payment on the store, how they built a life brick by brick, and how all that hard work was supposed to guarantee that my brother and I would never have to struggle the way they did. Lucas, well, he's the golden child. By the time he was 26, he'd paid off his college loans, climbed the tech ladder in Austin, and was engaged to Emily, a pediatric nurse with perfect hair and a Pinterest wedding board, color-coded down to the napkins. At every holiday dinner, it's like we're all seated in the Lucas show. Lucas just bought a 2nd property. Lucas' team at work just got a huge bonus. Lucas and Emily are planning a vacation to Bali. Meanwhile, I'd be there, pushing green beans around my plate, praying no one asked me what I was doing with my life. It's not that I resent him, not really, but sitting in his shadow makes it hard to believe my own light has any worth. When Dad looks at me, I can see the worry lines deepen around his eyes. "Sam," he says, "we just want you to have something solid under your feet." And Mom, always gentle, tries to soften it with a smile. "Honey, you're so talented. You just haven't found the right fit yet. But underneath, the message is the same. I'm drifting, unfocused. A gamble they're afraid to bet on. Lucas tries to hide his judgment behind polite offers. Sam, my company is always hiring in the marketing department. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. You could save up, get your own place, build a future. He says it like he's offering me a lifeline, but it feels more like a chain. They don't understand that I don't want a future built out of safe choices. I want a future that feels like mine, even if it's messy, but standing up to my family's vision of success. That's like trying to hold back the desert wind with my bare hands. And the truth is, I'm terrified that maybe they're right. It all came to a head on a freezing February afternoon in Manhattan. I'd been summoned into a conference room with glass walls so clear they felt like a cage. My boss, Diane, perched at the head of the table in her razor-sharp suit, tapping her pen like a metronome of doom. She said words like team player, attitude adjustment, and corporate loyalty, but all I heard was the sound of my life shrinking into a box I never wanted. And I snapped, I'm not selling dreams I don't believe in. Diane, her face went cold as steel. Then there's the door, Samantha. So I took it. I left my office keycard on the table, picked up my purse, and walked out into the icy wind. My breath puffed around me like smoke. I felt hollow and completely terrifyingly free. For 3 days, I barely left my apartment. I lay on the couch, counting the cracks in the ceiling, trying to remember who I was before I'd started living someone else's life. Then one night, I opened my laptop and pulled up a map of the United States. My eyes kept drifting west. Silver Creek, home. I packed everything I owned into my Subaru clothes. Photo albums, boxes of books I could never part with. I threw the last cardboard box in the trunk, slammed it shut, and stared at the Manhattan skyline one final time. Then I drove, through snowstorms, endless highways, motel coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. Every mile felt like I was peeling off layers I'd been suffocating in for years. By the time I rolled into Arizona, the sky was ablaze with streaks of red and gold. I took the back roads into Silver Creek, half afraid and half relieved to be coming home. And that's when I saw it. The Desert Rose Motel, set back from Route 89, hidden behind a tangle of mesquite trees. Its faded neon sign hung sideways, the pink glow flickering like a heartbeat on the edge of death. Something inside me caught fire, because the Desert Rose wasn't just any old motel. When I was a kid, I used to ride my bike past it, staring at the fancy cars parked out front. Rumor was, back in the 70s, movie stars and rock bands stayed there, hiding from the spotlight under the desert stars. And there was always the legend about a Hollywood actress who vanished in 1979, last seen checking into room 14 at the Desert Rose. I pulled into the gravel lot, killed the engine, and sat there gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. The building was a wreck, windows shattered, roof half collapsed. But I couldn't look away, because for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe. I knew right then. I wasn't going to just drive past. I was going to save it. Even if it ruined me. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, heart pounding like I was heading into battle. I drove back out to the Desert Rose Motel, dust swirling in my headlights. The cold desert air sliced through my jacket as I stepped out onto the gravel lot. The place looked even worse in daylight. The stucco walls were cracked and peeling. Shards of glass glittered in the dirt like tiny knives. A metal sign that once read, "Pool," hung by a single rusted chain, creaking in the wind. But beneath the decay, I saw it. The elegance hidden under the grime. Curved Art Deco lines around the lobby windows. Tiny turquoise tiles embedded in the door frames. The faded outlines of desert flowers painted across the facade. I grabbed my phone and started filming everything. My breath fogged the screen as I whispered into the camera. This place, it's a time capsule waiting to be rescued. A voice behind me made me nearly jump out of my skin. You thinking about buying this dump? I spun around and found a woman leaning against a dusty SUV. She wore jeans and cowboy boots. Her hair pulled back into a no-nonsense ponytail. I'm Carla Johnson, she said, flashing a business card. Real estate's my game, and I'm gonna save you the trouble right now. This place'll bleed you dry. She walked me around the property, pointing out every flaw. Roofs shot. Asbestos in the ceilings for sure. Lead paint everywhere. Plumbing's probably corroded to hell. And that's before we even talk environmental testing. I tried to stay cool, but the words made my stomach twist into knots. Carla paused in front of the old lobby door. You ever hear the story about the actress who disappeared here? I swallowed. I remember something about room 14. Carla nodded. Her name was Veronica Lane. Big star in the 70s. Came here to hide out from a scandal. One night she checked in, and no one ever saw her again. A chill rolled down my spine despite the blazing sun overhead. Carla sighed and shook her head. Sweetie, listen. Folks have tried to flip this place before. Always ends the same, broke and heartbroken. There's easier ways to set fire to your savings account. But I barely heard her. Because as I stood there, the desert wind whipping around me, I felt this certainty rise up inside my chest. I was meant to find the Desert Rose, and whatever secrets it held, I wasn't leaving without them. By the end of that week, I'd made up my mind. I emptied my savings account $95,000 I'd scraped together over years of corporate misery and put in an offer on the Desert Rose Motel. The bank countered higher. I fought them down. When they finally agreed to my price, I wired the money with shaking hands. When the transaction was done, I sat staring at the confirmation email. My chest felt tight, my fingers numb. I'd just bought a decaying motel in the middle of nowhere, with every dollar I had, and the moment the adrenaline wore off, reality came crashing in like a desert storm. My family needed to know. I drove to my parents' house, rehearsing my speech the whole way there. When I walked in, the smell of cinnamon rolls and coffee wrapped around me like a blanket. Mom was at the stove, Dad reading the newspaper. Lucas was home for the weekend, tapping away on his laptop at the kitchen table. Hey, Sam, he said without looking up. Did you finally apply for that marketing job I sent you? I swallowed hard. I actually have some news. Mom turned off the burner. Dad lowered the paper. Lucas closed his laptop with a soft click. I bought the Desert Rose Motel. Silence fell so heavy I could almost hear the clock ticking on the wall. Dad was the first to speak, voice low and measured. You bought it? Yeah. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm going to restore it. Bring it back to life. Maybe turn it into a vintage travel stop. People still love Route 89. Dad, the nostalgia, the history. He cut me off with a sharp gesture. Sam, that place is a death trap. It's falling apart, and God knows what's buried under those floors. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Honey, are you serious? All your money, gone. Lucas leaned forward, arms folded across his chest. Sam, this is exactly the kind of thing you always do. You get some wild idea. You jump in without thinking, and then you expect everyone else to help you pick up the pieces when it falls apart. That's not true, I shot back, heat rising in my cheeks. I've done the research. There are grants for historic preservation. There's value in that property. I can make it work. Dad slammed his hand on the table so hard the coffee cups rattled. You are gambling with your life, Samantha, and when this fails, you'll have nothing left. I clenched my fists until my nails bit into my palms. I'd rather go broke chasing something I believe in than spend one more day living a life that doesn't feel like mine. Lucas threw his hands up. Unbelievable. You think this makes you brave? It just makes you reckless. Don't come crying to us when you're bankrupt and homeless. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I'm not asking for your money or your permission. I'm doing this because I have to. Mom reached for my hand, voice trembling. Sweetie, please don't do this to yourself. I pulled my hand away. I'm sorry, but I already did. I turned and walked out, my footsteps echoing through the silent house. And even though my heart was breaking, a tiny voice inside me whispered, at least now, I'm finally living my own story. 2 weeks later, I stood in the center of the Desert Rose Motel, feeling like I'd bought myself a front-row ticket to hell. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Sunlight spilled through holes in the roof, striping the filthy floor in bands of gold and shadow. Every step echoed off cracked tile and splintered wood. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the list the county inspector had left me. Asbestos, lead paint, collapsing joists, mold, plumbing corroded beyond salvation, electrical system an outright fire hazard, environmental tests required before any work could even begin. The costs added up faster than I could read them. My savings had already been gutted by the purchase price, and now this list was threatening to bury me alive. But I refused to give up, so I did what I could. I bought heavy-duty trash bags, gloves, masks. Every morning, I showed up at dawn. I hauled out rusted bed frames, mattresses crawling with who knows what, old TVs shattered like broken dreams. I filled dumpster after dumpster, sweating through my clothes, muscles screaming in protest. But the more I cleaned, the more the motel seemed to fight back. Pipes burst without warning, flooding rooms ankle deep. Sections of ceiling caved in, sending plaster and rat droppings raining down on my head. One night, I curled up in my Subaru behind the motel, shivering under a blanket, too exhausted to drive home. Outside, coyotes howled in the dark. Inside, I kept replaying my family's voices. You're reckless. You'll have nothing left. Don't come crying to us. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the tears came anyway. The next morning, things got worse. I arrived to find spray paint scrawled across the motel's front wall in neon orange. Freak's Paradise. Windows smashed. Beer bottles littered the ground. My pile of salvaged tiles shattered into dust. Teenagers. Probably using the place as their private party ground. I dropped to my knees amid the wreckage, pressing my palms to the concrete, trying to hold back the wave of despair crashing through my chest. My fingers brushed something soft, a blanket, and beneath it, a man. He was curled up in a corner, his clothes filthy, hair matted, eyes wild with fear. Please, don't call the cops, he rasped. I stared at him, my heart pounding. Who are you? My name's Benny, he said, voice shaking. I used to work here, back in '79. Bellboy, I know things about what's hidden here. My pulse stuttered in my chest. Hidden where? Benny's eyes darted around like he expected someone to be listening. There's a vault, a real vault, behind one of the walls. Harold Jenkins, the owner, he used to hide stuff. Fancy stuff. From Hollywood people. People who didn't want nobody to know they were here. A chill rippled down my spine. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because suddenly, every crazy thing I'd ever felt about the Desert Rose Motel didn't seem so crazy anymore. And I realized maybe my gamble wasn't over yet. Maybe it was just beginning. The sun was barely cresting the horizon when I unlocked the lobby door the next day. Benny trailing close behind me, clutching a paper coffee cup like it was his last anchor to reality. Dust motes whirled through the air as we stepped into the silence. This way, Benny whispered, leading me past peeling wallpaper and warped doors. We reached the far end of the lobby, where a massive wooden shelving unit stood pressed against the wall. That's it, Benny said, voice trembling. It's behind there. I stared at the shelf. It looked solid enough, crammed with old motel ledgers, broken lamps, and boxes labeled linens. But as I ran my fingers along the edge, I felt it a faint draft seeping through a crack that shouldn't have been there. My pulse thundered in my ears. "Stand back," I said. I wedged my crowbar into the seam and pulled with everything I had. The wood creaked, groaned. Then, with a violent shudder, the entire shelving unit lurched forward, scraping across the floor. Behind it was a narrow doorway. Benny let out a strangled laugh. "I told you I wasn't crazy." I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. The hidden room swallowed me in darkness. The air smelled of old leather, oil, and something faintly sweet like dried flowers left too long in the sun. As the beam swept over the space, my breath caught in my throat. Glass display cases lined the walls, glittering in the dusty light. Shelves held stacks of old movie reels, reel-to-reel tapes, and delicate Art Deco sculptures wrapped in yellowing tissue paper. A collection of photographs lay spread across a table, black and white shots of celebrities laughing by the Desert Rose's neon pool sign. Veronica Lane was there, grinning, cocktail in hand, eyes sparkling like diamonds. But it was what sat in the center of the room that turned my blood to ice. A vault, 6 feet tall, heavy steel. The words, Desert Rose, etched across the front in swirling script. Benny stepped forward, eyes wide as saucers. That's it. Harold put everything in there. Money, jewels, secrets. Stuff he was holding for people who couldn't leave it in banks. I reached out and laid my hand on the cold metal. For a moment, the weight of every bad decision, every sleepless night, every word my family had thrown at me, lifted. Because this was proof I hadn't been crazy. But when I tried the handle, it wouldn't budge, locked tight. I sank onto a stool, heart hammering, staring at the vault that could either save me or remind me that hope can be the cruelest thing in the world. Benny shifted from foot to foot beside me. "You're gonna open it, right?" My eyes flicked up to the swirling Desert Rose lettering. "Yeah," I whispered, "I'm gonna open it." And deep inside, I knew I'd tear this whole place apart brick by brick if that's what it took to find out what secrets were waiting in that vault. For the next 2 days, sleep barely touched me. I kept replaying Benny's words in my head, and the glint of that vault in the beam of my flashlight. I called Ethan Reynolds, a guy I'd known back in college. He'd once been my lab partner in an art history elective, and now he worked in historical preservation, specializing in restoring old architectural sites and cracking open antique vaults without destroying whatever was inside. When Ethan pulled into the motel parking lot, he stepped out of his pickup wearing a ball cap and mirrored sunglasses, grinning like this was the most exciting field trip of his life. "Sam, I've never been this thrilled to be summoned to the middle of nowhere." Inside the hidden room, he ran his hands over the steel door, examining the dials and the faint scratches around the keyhole. "This baby's vintage, probably installed mid-60s. Looks custom. If there's cash in here, could be moldy. But if it's metal or jewels, might be pristine." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Can you open it without wrecking it?" He smirked. "Sam, please, I live for this." An hour later, after gentle turns of the dial, a stethoscope pressed to cold steel, and Ethan muttering curse words under his breath, the final latch clicked free. A metallic groan echoed through the room as the vault swung open. Inside was history. Stacks of manila envelopes, each marked with names I'd only read in gossip magazines from the 70s. Silver cigarette cases engraved with initials. Velvet boxes cradling rings big enough to blind a person in sunlight. But at the center sat something even more breathtaking, a small chest, carved with roses, inside of which lay a scattering of solid gold coins and a delicate diamond necklace. Ethan let out a low whistle. "Sam, this is Hollywood hush money stuff. You're sitting on a treasure trove, tucked beside the chest, wrapped in plastic, was a sheaf of official documents. I slipped them free, hands trembling. At the top, stamped in heavy red ink, were the words, National Register of Historic Places, Desert Rose Motel, listed 1978. My eyes flew over paragraphs declaring the building architecturally significant, tied to notable cultural figures, and eligible for preservation grants and tax credits. I felt my knees give way and sank onto the dusty stool behind me. "Sam, are you okay?" Ethan said, stepping closer. I let out a shaky laugh, tears spilling down my cheeks. This changes everything, because in that moment, I realized the Desert Rose wasn't just a money pit. It was a piece of American history, and it might just save me. By spring, Silver Creek's skies were cloudless and blazing blue, and the Desert Rose Motel was humming with the sound of power tools, paint sprayers, and laughter echoing off the newly restored walls. Ethan stayed on to help me oversee the work, mapping out every detail that would keep the building's vintage soul intact. We stripped layers of chipped paint to reveal the original turquoise and coral color scheme. Neon specialists rewired the iconic rose sign, so each curve now glowed bright pink against the desert night. Inside, the lobby was transformed from a dusty cave into a shimmering snapshot of mid-century elegance. Black and white checkered floors shone beneath Art Deco chandeliers. The front desk gleamed under fresh lacquer. Old photographs of celebrities at the Desert Rose hung in sleek frames, drawing visitors into whispers of Hollywood mystery. I sold a few of the vault's smaller treasures discreet trinkets with no personal names attached to fund the most urgent repairs. But I kept the necklace and the gold coins and every document tied to the motel's past. The National Register listing opened doors I hadn't even known existed. Grants poured in from the Arizona Historical Society and National Preservation Funds. The town council called me in for a meeting, and instead of berating me for being reckless, they offered expedited permits and tax incentives. Even Carla, the real estate agent who'd once tried to talk me out of this madness, stopped by and gaped at the transformation. "I'll be damned." "Sam," she said, shading her eyes as she stared up at the blazing neon sign. "You actually pulled it off." Word spread fast. An Arizona travel blogger came through and posted a glowing write-up. Then a TV crew from the local news shot a feature that aired across the state. Soon tourists were drifting into Silver Creek again. They came for the mystery of Veronica Lane and the vault full of secrets, and stayed for the chance to snap selfies beneath the neon roses, or browse the museum displays Ethan and I painstakingly curated with memorabilia from the vault. And then, one Saturday afternoon, I looked up from wiping down the front desk and saw my family standing just inside the door. Mom was wearing a flowery blouse, clutching Dad's arm like she might float away. Lucas stood behind them, his arms crossed, scanning the lobby with eyes that missed nothing. My heart lodged in my throat. Dad cleared his throat, voice gruff. "So, this is it?" I nodded, too choked up to speak. Mom's eyes shimmered with tears as she looked around at the sparkling floors, the photos on the walls, the neon glow spilling through the windows. "It's beautiful, Samantha." Lucas stepped forward, his voice quiet. "I've gotta admit, this is pretty incredible. If you ever want to talk about franchise opportunities or financial projections, I'm here. For the first time in my life, my brother didn't look like he pitied me. He looked proud." I let out a shaky breath. "Thanks, Lucas, I'll think about it." He nodded, giving me a small, genuine smile. And in that moment, I realized that I hadn't just rebuilt a motel. I'd rebuilt the bridge between me and my family. One dusty, neon-lit day at a time. That evening, the desert air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of sage and warm asphalt as twilight settled over Silver Creek. I stepped outside and stood beneath the neon glow of the Desert Rose sign, its pink petals blazing like a beacon against the darkening sky. Around me, laughter and chatter drifted from the lobby, where visitors were still wandering through displays of old Hollywood photos and vintage motel keys gleaming in glass cases. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the hum of the neon and the distant song of crickets wash over me. 6 months ago, I was drowning in fluorescent lights and corporate bullshit, believing the only way to survive was to play it safe. But safe doesn't set your soul on fire. Safe doesn't make your heart race when you pry open a hidden vault and glimpse gold and secrets older than your own lifetime. And safe definitely doesn't rebuild a forgotten motel into a place where strangers gather to remember that the past still matters. I opened my eyes and looked around at everything I'd fought for: the shining tiles, the flickering sign, the faces of people marveling at a piece of history I'd nearly let fade into dust. And for the first time, I felt whole. I thought about my parents, standing here earlier with pride in their eyes. About Lucas, who finally saw me as something other than the family wildcard. I thought about Benny, who disappeared as quietly as he'd arrived, leaving me with the truth about the vault and a reminder that sometimes the people we overlook hold the keys to everything we're searching for. And I thought about Veronica Lane, a woman who vanished into legend, but whose presence lingered in every shadow of this place. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that sometimes the walls you break down don't just hide rooms. They hide the parts of yourself you were too afraid to see. So here's what I want you to remember. No dream is too crazy if it sets your heart pounding. Sometimes the risk that terrifies you the most is the one that finally makes you feel alive. And the things that look like worthless ruins to everyone else might just be the treasures that define your life. So take the leap. Chase the whisper in your chest that won't leave you alone. Because you might just find that what you're searching for is waiting right behind a wall you never thought to push open. And if you ever find yourself driving through the Arizona desert, keep your eyes peeled for a flicker of neon roses along Route 89. The Desert Rose Motel's sign is always shining, and there's always room for another traveler chasing the road less taken.